This is 5 Minute Feng Shui podcast episode 104, Roads and Streets. Welcome to the 5 Minute Feng Shui podcast, where each week I talk about how to move energy and make money. You'll learn how to create a prosperous home and an abundant life using classical Chinese Feng Shui. I'm your host, Katie Weber, publisher of the Red Lotus Letter, Feng Shui Easing for Wealth. Each week, I'll cover Feng Shui topics that can help you improve your life, share inspiring stories, and always end with 3 easy-to-implement Feng Shui tips that you can put to work right away, and usually in about 5 minutes. Now let's get started on the 5 minutes that could change your life. Hello and welcome back. Today we're talking about roads and streets, and who would have thought they'd make such a big impact on your Feng Shui, but they do. Now, when Feng Shui originated several thousand years ago, it took into account the effects of landmarks like lakes, rivers, ponds, mountains, hills, and other environmental considerations when determining the benefit or impact of Feng Shui on a home or building. Now today it's much the same, but in addition to natural landmarks, homeowners now have to take into account influences of modern times like roadways, buildings, electrical wires, because these also impact the Feng Shui of your home or your office if you're in an office building. Now the good news is that most difficulties associated with roads can be overcome with Feng Shui. Now I used to live in an area and watched one really lovely home go up for sale in succession, one after the others, all to different owners. Year after year, a new owner would move into this beautiful home, and then another for sale sign would go up. What was interesting to me was that this home's relationship to the road that led up to it. The home was located on a major bend in a heavily traveled road, and it made cars appear to head straight for the house as they traveled at a high rate of speed. Interestingly, now this was before they came to the curve, but interestingly, at this particular bend where the cars would go past the house, opposite from that was a big tree and a small graveyard. Now this arrangement directly impacted the luck of the many residents of this house of the years that I was there. This is when I was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I lived in this neighborhood for 7 years, and almost as many homeowners appeared in this house as years I lived there. So it was like it turned over like 5 times, I think, while I had lived there. And what was also interesting is how many drivers were killed at this big tree and this graveyard as they approached this fatal bend in the road. Finally, though, one smart new homeowner purchased some really large hedges shortly after moving in and had them planted in line that blocked the view of the cars that would be speeding toward their house and also their headlights. Because just think about that. If a car is aimed at a house at nighttime, their headlights were going to be on the house as well. But it also blocked the view of this little cemetery and the large trees where so many of these cars would wreck. And what's interesting, though, is the residents of that house stayed there, and they stayed there until after we had moved away. So I think that that's a really important lesson on how roads can impact you. So you always want to look at what is the approach to your home. Is the approach on a bend? Is it there a curve? Are you on a dead end of a street? Many times people who live at the absolute corner or the straight on from a cul-de-sac, they think that that's the prime location to be at the end of the cul-de-sac. But if you have a street that's heading straight on and is straight on at that house, that's a lot of energy aimed at your house. So that's something to be thinking about in terms of the type of energy that you have at that home for the residents of that home, and how their life is impacted by that. So I think that we want to always look at the type of energy coming in our homes, because it can limit us and it can bring us benefits. One house that was also striking in its relationship to roads was the house where Robin Williams committed suicide. The street of his house was just a mere few feet from the front door. So there was no bright hall, which is the open space where chi gathers and brings opportunity home. which could explain some of the limited film opportunities he was experiencing them. But then there was this bigger, even more serious problem, and that was the water that was exactly at the back, directly at the back of the house. So here he is the fence of the home is probably, I bet, 10 feet from the street, or the front door is probably 10 feet from the home. And then on the other side was water. And it was too close. There was not enough room. It was as if this home was being almost pushed into the water. And it's really sad because I loved Robin Williams, and I thought when I heard he had committed suicide, I said, I want to look at his home and see what it looked like, because I just look at those things. Even like when I think Jennifer Aniston and Brad Pitt got divorced, I looked at their home. They had a sort of an open courtyard with this big tree in the middle of it, and that's very negative and devastating for relationships. Now, with this road at the front of his house and water at the back, Robin Williams was sandwiched by a lack of support and opportunity, much like being backed off a cliff. So when you have a road directly behind the house and one in front, this can be disastrous for health, wealth, and opportunities, as we saw in Mr. Williams' untimely and tragic end. And now there is some feng shui thought that certain entry and exit directions are beneficial for roads surrounding our houses, and some are detrimental. The problem with this type of feng shui is those benefits really only apply when the road is a one-way street, which few, if any, houses actually have. So when there's a road, like most houses have, is a two-way road, the effects become sort of neutral. So unless you live on a one-way street, it's really hard to make those kinds of feng shui determinations. But to determine your home's arrangement to roads, one of the things I love to use is Google Earth. It's one of the best online feng shui tools because it gives you a bird's eye view of your home and its relationship to roads, ditches, other buildings, and environmental influences such as hills or ponds or lakes. You should also take into account the road's speed when determining the effect it may have on your home or life. Now, like my example, where I used to live, this was a heavily trafficked and a very high-speed road, and it made the road energy more dangerous than if it were in a neighborhood with a slow rate of speed at that curve. So let's talk about some of the road arrangements that you could possibly have and how they can impact your home and life. The first one is the inside curve. So when your home is located, if you have a street that's in front of your house and it's on a curve, if you're on the inside of the curve, you're being hugged by the road, which symbolizes water. And that's really auspicious. Now, the people on the other side of you, like your neighbors across from you, they're on the outside of the curve. And that means that energy of the curve is aimed at them. So you may notice that maybe life isn't as easy for them. The steepness of that curve also has an impact. So the steeper the curve is, the more sharp the angle is, or the roundness of the curve, the more dangerous it is too, just like the speed of the road. And so that exterior curve, if your house is sitting on an exterior bend of the road, this can become a little bit of a poison arrow. So what can you do about this? You can add a row of hedges, like the one house that I described earlier. You can add a wall or a solid fence. Obviously, hedges are probably the least expensive thing to do, but that's one way that you can kind of soften the energy that's angled at you. Now, let's talk about another one, and that is the T intersection. Now, this is the most dangerous and problematic. A lot of entrances to subdivisions end this way, with cars coming into the neighborhood and having to turn either left or right. And what can happen here is the house that is directly opposite where the street goes in, this is the house that has to absorb all this energy of the oncoming cars. And we'll often see houses that we see so many of the homes in these neighborhoods have a high turnover rate with for sale signs constantly going up. You know which the house I'm talking about? This is really harmful for the home values in the neighborhood as well as the people who live there. Just think of it, they're always being under attack, basically, by all these cars that are being aimed at them. And also just think about it nighttime. If it's nighttime and the lights are shining in your house all the time, that becomes disrupted. So whenever I see neighborhoods that you come to and the street terminates and you have to turn left or right and there's a house directly in line with the street, I always feel sorry for those houses because I think that's a lot of energy that they're having to absorb from all those oncoming cars. Now, let's talk about cul-de-sacs and dead ends. When a home is located on a cul-de-sac or a dead end, there's a stoppage of energy. The flow of the road is interrupted, and that can sometimes create financial difficulties, especially if the home's in directly in line with the road, like kind of like what we talked about earlier. And because it works like a T intersection, and it can aim some harmful energy at the home and the occupants. Again, you're going to need some type of shield to be erected there, whether it's a wall or a fence or hedges. Homes in cul-de-sacs or dead ends can sometimes suffer from declining energy. So good landscaping and lighting and keeping your curb appeal up is so important for keeping that energy refreshed and lifted so that that home enjoys growing chi. That's really important. Now, elevated roads are another problem as well. When roads are lifted off the ground and a home sees the road, this adds a knife edge quality to the road. Because these roads are often like highways, the speed creates even more cutting energy. Now, you might recognize this you see some neighborhoods. I know driving through some downtown neighborhoods, you'll see older neighborhoods maybe, and then they've been developed with highways and freeways, and you'll see like exit ramps and entrance ramps, and those roads are lifting up off of the ground, and they look like, if you were to look parallel with the home, it would look like the road is slicing the house in half. There's not a whole lot you can do to counteract these roads other than just block the view of them. Let's talk about sandwich roads. Now, these are roads that when your home has a street, this is like Robin Williams. If your home has a street running in front of it and running directly behind it. This is like being sandwiched between two bodies of water. That's because roads in Feng Shui are looked at as water. They're conduits of water. And this is the way they're symbolically looked at. And if you think about it, whenever you see rain at your home, if you look outside and you have quite a bit of rain, you will often see water flowing down your street. And so that makes sense that streets become a channel for water. So back to this sandwich road. These sandwich roads are really difficult because it can create some financial problems, struggles with career, struggles with business footing. Money may come and go quickly with a slow and steadily diminishing bank account. That's never a good thing. So we always want to make sure that there's a nice solid fence or wall at the rear of the house, especially at the rear of the house, if you could do that, or that the view of the road at the rear is blocked in particular. So again, we talk about the actor Robin Williams, who tragically committed suicide. You could say that his water side is the facing direction, and I believe it is on his home, but this still puts a street directly at his back, not 15 feet from the door, making it its ability to drain his assets and, in fact, his life. So it's really important that if you have a sandwich road, now so what I mean by that is his house faced water. So you would say that big open ocean that he was looking at out at the rear of the house, that was actually the facing direction. But at the front of the house, the technical front, where he parked the car and where the mailbox was, this is where the street was running by. And it was so shallow. I mean, the street was right up against this front door of his. And if he could have put a solid wall fence, that would have made a big difference, I think, and could have helped. Now, I know he had Lewy body dementia, but I do think perhaps that he might not have gone so tragically, or we wouldn't have lost him quite so soon. But I think it could have helped, I believe. Now, let's talk about road heights. Now, if your home is on a road that's on level, always, so for instance, if it has a rise or something, always approach your home from the lower side of the street so that when you are driving to your home, you are entering from a lower level to a higher one. Avoid entering or driving up to your home by going down the street rather than up it. This helps prevent good qi from coming into your home when you're driving up to it. This means that you are always seeing this as an upward step. Now, one other road that is a problem, and that is the road that is raised above the house. If the house is below the road level, then this is a particular problem. Life is a struggle. It's really a constant struggle. It's very rarely that those houses are successful, but sometimes there are. I can't say that there's 100% case where every house that's below street level has difficulties. It also depends on how the house is built, what kind of views are out the backside of that house. The road being above the house could actually end up being supportive if they're like Robin Williams, the back of the house is actually the facing direction. But that's rarely the case. If you have a house that's below level, really, really important that you have lights and all kinds of lights at the front. So that might be lights on your walkway, a big lamp post at the street level, really grand lights on the front of the house to lift that energy up. So the more lighting that you could put at the front of the house, the more it can lift your house if your house is below street level. Well, there you go. Roads and streets, all the things you need to know about how roads and streets affect your home. Now let me leave you with 3 tips. Tip number 1, if there's a road behind your house, make sure you add trees or a fence, anything to block the view of the road. I also like putting fences and trees together. I think that anything that you can do to add layers of support would be extremely helpful. Number 2 is buy houses on an inside of a curve. If you can manage, if you're looking for a new home and you can manage finding one on the inside of a curve, always take those over those on the outside of a curve. Remember the example I gave you of the house that was on a curve and had cars zooming past it and their lights shining in the windows, and they had constant turnover of the house. Life was hard for all those people that had lived in the houses before the new owners put up a big row of hedges that block those views. And lastly, tip number 3 is avoid T intersections and being in direct line of a cul-de-sac. These houses have a tendency to have high turnover. We often see them in subdivisions. If that's the case, do what you can to get a solid wall up or some type of hedges, anything to sort of block the view and impede the energy that's coming and being aimed at you from the oncoming cars. Have a great week. I'll talk to you on the next episode on 5-Minute Feng Shui. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of 5-Minute Feng Shui. If you did, please be sure to share this episode with your friends on social media, and let's change the world one home at a time. For more Feng Shui information and inspiration, sign up for my free weekly Feng Shui Easy. Just drop by redlotusletter.com to sign up, and I'll be in your inbox every Wednesday. And if you like this episode, I'd love it if you left a review on iTunes. If you do, send me the screenshot of your review to katie@redlotusletter.com with iTunes review in the subject line, and I'll send you a free gift as my thank you. I'll see you next week on the next episode of 5-Minute Feng Shui.